Let's talk about Kentucky. Especially if you live in Kentucky, I want you to listen to this. There is an amendment that will be on the ballot this November in Kentucky only that basically asks voters, do you want to decimate the public schools in our state and funnel millions of dollars to religious indoctrination centers? And the answer to that is no. But let me show you what the amendment is, because this would change Kentucky's constitution. Here's Amendment 2. And it basically, look at the word salad here, because this is what will appear on the ballot. To give parents choices in educational opportunities for their children, are you in favor of enabling the General Assembly to provide financial support for the education costs of students in kindergarten through 12th grade who are outside the system of common public schools by amending the Constitution of Kentucky as stated below? It is proposed that a new section be added to the Constitution of Kentucky to read as follows. The General Assembly may provide financial support for the education of students outside the system of common schools. The General Assembly may exercise this authority by law, sections, blah, 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 of the Constitution notwithstanding. Which is, again, I'm sure they have to say it that way in some parts, but like, what does that mean? Basically, the Kentucky Constitution says taxpayer dollars can only be used to support the common schools, which are public schools. You can't fund anything that's not a public school. And what this amendment is saying is, should we undo that? Should we add a line that says, yeah, we can ignore that. We can fund private schools and religious schools and anything we want. That's the amendment that's going to be on the ballot. Okay. So they're using the euphemistic language of school choice, and they want to create a voucher program that would funnel taxpayer dollars to private schools. And most private schools are religious schools, and most religious schools are Christian schools. And by the way, most of those Christian schools are attended by families that can already afford them. They don't need the vouchers. So that's what's on the ballot this November. And right now, Kentucky is one of the few states, one of many states that doesn't have a voucher program. I think they're one of the only states in the South that does not have a voucher program. But as the Washington Post, they had this great article back in June about voucher programs. Look at this headline: billions in taxpayer dollars now go to religious schools via vouchers. And look at, I want to show you this map right here. Look at the schools with voucher programs. And you could see, like, some of them have universal vouchers, some of them have smaller programs. The dark blue are really the ones with the most damaging voucher programs, and they're the states you would kind of expect. Texas hasn't gotten there yet. They're trying to, but Florida has these programs. Kentucky, though, Kentucky is one of the only ones that does not in that part of the country. I happen to be from Illinois. We sure as hell aren't going to give them vouchers to private schools. So yay for us. But anyway, that's what they're trying to change. That's what Republicans in Kentucky want to change. And in this article, check out some of these facts here. Billions in taxpayer dollars are being used to pay tuition at religious schools throughout the country as state voucher programs expand dramatically and the line separating public education and religion fades. And some of these programs, they're offering up to $16,000 per kid per year. That is taxpayer money that they are giving to those kids to attend a Christian school if they want to. So that's disturbing. In just 5 states with expansive programs, more than 700,000 students benefited from vouchers this school year. The programs, popular with conservatives, are rapidly growing in GOP-run states, with a total of 29 states plus DC operating some sort of voucher system. So, lots of money at play here. This is very disturbing. It's also disturbing here when you realize this: when vouchers for students with autism and other disabilities who typically seek specific services are removed from the list, the portion going toward religious education rises to 98%. Like, what the hell? That's disturbing as well. How much money are we talking about? Well, let's look at Arizona. In Arizona, in 2022, 2023, 3/4 of the money, about $229 million, went to 184 vendors. Most of that went for tuition, 87% to religious schools. Like, so much money to religious schools. In Arizona, though, the cost of universal vouchers has exceeded the $624 million budgeted for this year, contributing to a budget hole that lawmakers have not yet said how they will fill. That budget crunch could affect public school spending and certainly makes any increases unlikely at a time when public schools are struggling. Arizona schools are not able to pay for teacher pay raises or desperately needed resources. You just have teachers begging for copy paper and markers. It's so bad. This is robbing our local public schools and our most vulnerable students. And now Kentucky wants in on that game. That's how disturbing this is. So there is a left-leaning group, but they actually looked into this. And let me show you this study. They just put out a report from the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. They estimate that if Kentucky were to adopt an educational voucher system like Florida's, it would cost Kentucky $1.2 billion a year, enough to pay for nearly 10,000 public school teachers and employees. Florida's voucher system is the largest of its kind. If they did a smaller model similar to Arizona, it would cost Kentucky $200 million annually. And that's still about 1,650 Kentucky public school employees. So this is what Kentucky is considering if they pass this voucher plan. It would be between $200 million and $1.2 billion a year, a difference of $1 billion. And that's money coming out of public funding, taxpayer money, and going to private, mostly religious schools. It's not like Kentucky is already ranked really high, by the way, when it comes to public schools. But this is, and look at that last line here. But first, voters would have to approve constitutional amendment number 2. So this is what Kentucky could do if they wanted to. Like, it's a horrible idea for so many reasons. And as one of the director of the group that did that report said, Amendment 2 would provide a blank check to the legislature to allow them to fund private schools for the first time. And by the way, another report said this would hurt rural Kentucky more than anywhere else. Let me see if I could pull that up here somewhere, because I found that also to be very disturbing. Is that here? Here we go. This is in the same article. Here we go. Yet a voucher system could disproportionately impact poorer rural counties where property values are low and therefore generate less property tax revenue for schools than in districts with more valuable real estate. So you get the idea here. If you're taking public money, putting them into private schools, you know who's not getting public money? It's the districts where they're also not getting property tax money. Like, those are the schools that need state help the most. And now we're taking that money from them and putting it into private religious schools. Like, it would hurt rural counties. And guess what? There's a whole bunch of them in Kentucky. So very, very disturbing stuff overall. It would also create additional problems too. Think about this, if parents decided to homeschool their kids, they would be eligible to get thousands of dollars per kid per year to do that. And that would mean not only is that bad for public schools, homeschooling is already not well regulated. So these parents would get thousands of dollars per kid in taxpayer dollars with very little oversight, if any, into what they're teaching their kids. And the problem with homeschooling, one of the many problems with homeschooling, is that the state doesn't even know if those kids are getting an education. And it's so rife with abuse because kids don't get an education. They don't know they're not getting an education. And the parents are like, don't touch me. You can't get around. You can't ask me what I'm teaching my child. That's government intrusion. Like, Kentucky's laws are famously bad regarding what parents are required to do if they're homeschooling. And here's another loophole I did not anticipate. Okay, this is from an op-ed written in the Lexington Herald Leader. Someone pointed this out. Even worse, a church school could accept a child's voucher money. Then, for reasons real or contrived, they could kick the child out a month or two into the school year and keep the tax dollars they've already collected. So all the more incentive to say yes to admit anyone they want to, and then kick them out because of whatever sin you want to pretend is going on. So that's another loophole Kentucky would need to think about. By the way, in Indiana, that same person pointed out, Lawmakers gave $439 million to private schools via vouchers, and church schools got 98% of that amount. And again, what is this money being used for? It's not education. They're funding creationism, homophobia, anti trans misinformation, Sunday school nonsense. You know what they're not teaching? Comprehensive history, sex ed, proper science. And now Kentucky is like, we should try that. We should try not teaching our kids and see how that goes. Like, taxpayer dollars should not be used to prop up religion. And instead of giving money directly to churches, conservatives have figured out a way to give it to religious schools while destroying public schools and legal precedent along the way. So, Amendment 2 is not going to make life better for kids in desperate need of a good education because the law isn't meant for those kids. If you wanted to help those kids get a good education, fund the public schools so all those kids could get a better education. Like, they are hurting public schools, and if public schools struggle, that has a ripple effect throughout the state. And after making public schools worse, you know what conservatives are going to do? They're going to say, well, public schools suck, so we should give more money to private religious schools. Like, the people who live in religious bubbles do not care about life outside their bubble. That's how selfish they are here. They're willing to let others suffer in the long term as long as they get to benefit in the short term. I actually showed you a video, I think, last week of a pastor from Florida urging other pastors to launch their own church-based schools so that they could get taxpayer dollars in Florida and use that to baptize kids and convert them. Like, providing kids with a quality education is not a priority for these people. A state's education dollars belong in public schools, not church basements. So again, Kentucky courts so far have stopped all this from happening because the Kentucky Constitution says all public money goes to common schools, public schools. And that's why Republicans are now trying to pass this amendment to upend that. And I should say kudos to Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, because he's come out proudly against this amendment. Here's Andy Beshear. Public dollars should only go to public schools, period, Beshear said. I am against this constitutional amendment, and if they pass it, I will work every day to defeat it at the ballot box in November. Well, they did pass it. Now it's his job to defeat it at the ballot box, and hopefully the sort of people who elected Andy Beshear, and maybe even others, will say, no, we like our public schools. We like our teachers. We want them to be teaching our kids. That would be the smart thing to do. So, Kentucky people, vote no on that amendment. That's the smart thing to do if you care about kids and if you care about education.